Hi, thanks for joining us. We're just going to leave a couple minutes for people to continue joining. All right, I'm just going to start things off now. And as people trickle in, that's all right. So first of all, I wanted to start by acknowledging the country that I'm calling in from today. I'm calling in from the land of the Wadi people on Dharawal country, and I pay my respects to ancestors and elders past and present. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I also extend my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today, and I'd like to invite you all to share in the chat what country you're calling in from today. I also want to give a diversity statement. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the value of the unique personalities, strengths, interests, and abilities of everyone here today. Each individual adds to our vibrant and diverse community. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. I just wanted to grab everyone's consent for recording this session, as it's going to be put up onto the Women with Disabilities Australia website. If you could give a thumbs up or put in the chat if that's all good. Awesome, thank you all. You can see a couple of thumbs coming through. Amazing. So welcome to today's session. This is session 1 of our public decision-making workshops. I'm Rhiannon. I'll give a physical description. I'm wearing a black with white dots dress, gold-rimmed glasses, and have a brunette bob and fringe. I'm joined by Kat, the lead project manager at WWDA today as well, calling in. And I also just want to give some basic housekeeping. So you don't have to have your cameras on if you don't want to, that's fine. And if you want to ask a question, feel free to pop it in the chat or put your hand up, use the hand function at the bottom. We also have an Auslan interpreter with us today. We have 2, and we also have live captioners. So those options are at the bottom of the screen for you. And if you have any questions, please message me directly in the chat if you want to. And I'm just going to put in our helpline numbers. So if anyone is experiencing violence or would like to seek some more help from crisis support services, you can visit this link. And I've just popped that in the chat now. Cool. Did anyone have any questions or anything they wanted to bring up before we start sharing? Awesome. I will start sharing my screen. Can you all see that on my screen? On your screen? Sorry. Cool. Can see thumbs up coming through. Thank you. Cool. So, welcome to today's first session of the public decision-making workshops run by me, Rhiannon Halling. So just an agenda and an outline of today's workshop. So we're going to give a brief introduction about me, talk about what public decision-making is, why representation matters, the gendered lens on public decision-making, the decision-making process, and we'll also go through a decision-making process exercise and then wrap up with any questions at the end. So a little bit about me. So I use she, her pronouns. I am a policy student and I have my Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and also majoring in politics. I'm an activist and very passionate when it comes to public decision-making and policy cycle. So I thought in line with the lead team's values, this would be a great opportunity for me to use my passions and strengths. So I've done a brief physical description and yeah, I'm joined by Kat from the lead team today as well. So start off. So what is public decision making? So public decision making is referring to the process of making choices, determining actions, and reaching conclusions that affect the general public or a specific community. It involves considering the interests, concerns, and needs of individuals and groups within the public sphere and finding solutions or policies that serve the common good. In public decision-making, various stakeholders such as government officials, policymakers, and the community and representatives and citizens come together to discuss and deliberate on issues of public importance. This process typically involves gathering the information, analysing data, evaluating potential options, and engaging in dialogue to understand different perspectives and reach consensus or make a collective decision. There are key characteristics involved with public decision-making, which involves public involvement, transparency, accountability, inclusivity, rationality, and evidence-based. There's also public interest as well. So public decision-making aims to include the voices and perspectives of individuals and groups who are affected by the decision. It encourages active participation from stakeholders throughout public consultations, town hall meetings, surveys, public hearings, and other forms of engagement. So transparency, the decision-making process should be transparent, ensuring that information and data relevant to the decision are made available to the public. Transparent processes help build trust, allow for scrutiny, and enable stakeholders to understand how decisions are reached. Inclusivity, so public decision-making strives to be inclusive, considering the needs and perspectives of diverse groups within society. Efforts are made to involve marginalized communities, minority groups, and individuals from different backgrounds to ensure that decisions are fair and equitable and representative. So we need evidence-based procedure. When it comes to public decision-making, we need evidence-based procedures. This is involving data, conducting research, consulting experts, and helps ensure that the choices are informed and grounded in facts rather than personal biases or uninformed opinions. So in democracy in particular, it is really important that we have intersectionality and representation within public decision-making. So it allows the individuals to participate in shaping policies and decisions that affect their lives. It ensures that the diverse needs, perspectives, and experiences of different groups within the population are taken into account, including those associated with intersectionality. So intersectionality refers to the interconnected nature of social categorizations, such as race, gender, class, sexuality, and ability, among other things. It recognizes that individuals can experience multiple forms of discrimination and oppression based on the various dimensions of their identity. Considering intersectionality in public decision-making is essential for many different reasons, including equity and inclusivity. Intersectionality will highlight the challenges faced by individuals who belong to multiple marginalized groups. By including diverse voices in decision-making processes, policymakers can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the experiences and needs of these groups. This will help promote fairness, inclusivity, and helps identify and address systematic inequalities. So representativeness, it's really important that public decision-making includes and reflects the composition of the society it is serving. Intersectionality helps emphasize that no single individual or group can fully represent the experiences and perspectives of everyone. By involving diverse individuals and communities in this decision-making process, it increases the likelihood of capturing a wide range of viewpoints, promoting more informed and representative policies. So intersectionality and representation is really important, as it also allows us to avoid as much bias and discrimination as possible. Traditional decision-making processes can often be influenced by bias and discrimination. This results in policies that disproportionately affect groups. By incorporating intersectionality, decision-making processes will be able to recognize and challenge these biases, working towards a more equitable outcome. And through intersectionality and representation, the policy quality will also approach a more nuanced understanding of complex social issues. And the last point about intersectionality and representation's importance is that it allows for more social cohesion and solidarity. So by valuing and respecting the voices of individuals from different backgrounds, it can promote a sense of belonging and shared responsibility. This collaborative approach enhances social cohesion, builds trust in institutions, and can strengthen societal and social bonds within society. Incorporating intersectionality into public decision-making is vital for achieving a fair and just society. It ensures that policies and decisions address the unique challenges faced by individuals with intersecting identities, and it promotes inclusivity, equity, and social cohesion. By valuing diverse perspectives, decision makers can craft policies that reflect the needs and realities of the entire population. So, another really important thing to consider when we look at intersectionality and representativeness in the public decision-making process is looking at the gendered lens and also the inclusion of people living with disabilities. So the Convention on the United Nations Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a list of rights that people with disabilities have. The convention is made up of different parts called articles, and in Article 29, it states about the right to take part in politics. The article says that all people with disabilities have the same right to partake in politics as other citizens. The convention also asks that the governments make sure that people with disabilities have the same chances to partake in politics as anyone else. This means that the governments that sign on have a responsibility to support people with disabilities in taking part and being active political citizens. The right to vote and stand for elections is very important, and giving people with disabilities the same access to these opportunities is crucial to make sure we are representative in our public decision-making process. So our gender perspective is really important. It's one of the main reasons being that policies impact on men and on women in different ways, in different functions and forms. So because of the economic and social differences already between the genders, policy consequences, intended and unintended, often vary along gender lines. It's only through a gender analysis of policy that these differences become apparent and solutions devised. So through public policy, we have the capacity to either perpetrate or eliminate discrimination and gender inequality and disability inequality. It is only by putting these lenses on the public decision-making process, however, that we will begin to develop and implement policy that is representative of everyone and helps advance everyone's rights. Awesome. So now we're going into the public decision-making, the process of breaking this down. Did anyone have any steps so far? Not steps, sorry, questions so far? Cool, can't see anything in the chat. Okay, so breaking down the process of public decision-making. So first off, we have the first step, which is identifying the issue. So when you have come to the crucial point of making a decision in the public sphere, the first step is identifying the issue. So this is the stage that we identify and clearly define the gap in policy and law. We figure out the problem at hand and identify it, and the clear objectives are stated. Step 2 is stakeholders. So good policy and decision requires rigorous consultation and engagement with stakeholders, including those who are experts in relevant fields. Experts such as academics and professionals who can supply knowledge and advice which helps create effective law and policy. Stakeholders include those who are affected by the decision, those who have the vested interests, and also those considering keeping the problem a problem. So step 3. Step 3 is gathering the information and getting the background. So this step is really important because this is where you gather all past relevant documents, policies, considerations, laws, recommendations, resources, information, anything that is relevant to the decision being made. We can also gather the findings from stakeholders as well. Step 4 is developing options and alternatives. So it is important to have a list of all the possible solutions that can be used. This stage will involve all the stakeholders necessary for this and is an important step, as you will have your alternatives and options in the background when making decisions in case the first decision isn't available. So step 5 is the evaluation process. So step 5 is really important. It's to evaluate and weigh up the evidence. This is where we determine the relevant considerations and key facts. A key fact is something whereby the existence or non-existence of the fact can affect a decision. The evidence must be relevant to the questions before the decision maker and accurate so that any material facts can be established. When evaluating the evidence, the decision maker must ignore irrelevant considerations. And the final step is weighing the evidence. So drawing on your information and emotions to imagine what it would be like if you carried out each of the alternatives to the end. So evaluating whether the need identified in step 1 would be met or resolved through the use of each alternative. As you go through this difficult internal process, you'll begin to favour certain alternatives, those that seem to have a higher potential for you reaching your goal, and finally placing the alternatives in a priority order based upon your own value and research system. And then, sorry, there was 2 extra steps I forgot there. So step 7 is the implementation process. So once you've reached your decision, it's time to act on it. This is where we develop a plan to make the decision tangible and achievable. The final step in that process is the review stage. So once implemented, you need to create effective review processes to ensure the outcome is up to date and relevant. Now, with all that process in mind, we are going to do an exercise now. I'm about to share in the chat a link to Google Jamboard. So I'll give some instructions on that as well, how to use that if you've never used Jamboard before. The example that we're going to be using is making public spaces more accessible and inclusive. So I'll send the link to the Jamboard in the chat and we will go through this workshop practice now. All right, so I'm just sending that link in the chat now. Let me know if there's any issues accessing that link, or if it's all good, you can get it up on your screen. I'm also going to share the screen as well, so we can go through it together. Okay, so the way that Google Jamboard works, if you want to add your own points, is we click over on the side to the sticky note function, and you just choose whatever color you want to, and you can type there, click save, and drag it wherever you want on the screen. So for this exercise, I thought the best way we can go through it is if you want to send anything in the chat, you can do that, or you can type it up yourself, depending if you want to speak up or not. And we'll just work through this. Feel free to take your microphone off to go through each of the steps. So we'll start with stage 1 of the process. So identifying the issue. So I'll write the issue here. We are trying to come up with policy and public decisions, making public spaces more accessible. So this can be through the use of handrails, through signage that has braille, inductive hoop. Oh, sorry, my Zoom just went funny. But yeah, so feel free to type up here on the screen anything that you can think of, or come off mute if you want to as well. So public So this is our main objective, is to create more accessible public spaces. Does anyone want to jump in and send anything in the chat about how we can do this, how another option is? So I will just put down some sticky notes. So defining the problem is that enough public areas are not accessible to everyone and not inclusive. Awesome, Emily's just popped in the chat, removing stigma and making disability more visible. So having accessible spaces isn't seen as a foreign concept. Amazing, we'll add that as well. Public. Awesome. Move these around. Did anyone else have any thoughts on objectives of why we need to identify this issue, or defining the problem? Why is this happening? Why aren't public spaces being built automatically with accessibility in mind? Money, yeah, that's a great response. So we can put resources, so money and time, as well as workforce. So if we're to diagnose the issue here, what would be the best case scenario? We can diagnose the issue with multiple different outcomes. Resources delivery. Yep, that's a great point. Resources delivery. Another great way to diagnose an issue is to have a mandate. We can put in a minimum standard for public spaces accessibility. Securing funding from key organizations and generating trust from stakeholders. Amazing. I add that point too. Public education and awareness of the realities of people with lived experiences. Perfect. Those are great points. Just adding them all in now. Okay, so stage one of the process is defining the objectives, defining the problem, and diagnosing the issue. So some of the objectives, problems, and the issues there is we've mentioned the resources, the resource delivery, securing the funding, removing stigmas and making disability more visible. And we've got education there as well. I think those tie in together really well. The stigmas and education is really important. We need to be seen as having the political and policy knowledge to be taken seriously. Yep. Perfect. And then another reason why representativeness and inclusivity is really important in this stage, to make sure that all decisions being made have that lens on it, but they're also co-design. Yeah, amazing point. There are also very few politicians with disability. Yeah. So again, that comes down to a representative issue again. I'll take us onto stage 2 now. So when we think about the stakeholders that are involved with making public areas more accessible, who are the main people involved? So it can be government, it can be individuals, it can be groups, building and construction. That's a great start. I'll add that in. Architects, town planners, yep. Town planners. City councils, yep. So, and who will have the vested interest in making places more accessible? Who is going to be the most affected as well, whether that be positively or negatively? Making education more accessible so we can educate people with a disability to study these design principles to make changes. Perfect. We can put that down as a side note. That is a perfect example, again, why we need the education and representativeness to ensure that all these decisions are including everyone that's going to be affected. Another important one as well is depending on what the place being built, renovated or affected, getting the correct government. So if that's going to be state, federal or local or all three. Sure. So awesome. Got another comment here. Engaging with local people with disabilities to be involved in how spaces are designed or renovated so that they can test the facilities. So any ramps that do not fit and do not fit needs. Perfect, exactly. So key stakeholders will be consulting with the locals near the area. So this ensures that they're getting the correct input from those directly affected. Can also, when it comes to this issue, go to any major peak bodies or NGOs that will be relevant to this as well. People with disabilities, potential to feel included, valued, and an active member of their community. Perfect. And that comes back to the United Nations Article 29 speaking about that people with disabilities are just as encouraged to take part in political life as those without disability. Awesome. I'm going to move on to, oh, we've got another comment. Engage with engineers so we can one day have accessible and safe road crossings. I would love to cross roads safely one day. My work has able-bodied people go around campus in a wheelchair to see how buildings can be improved. Oh, yeah, that's, yeah, definitely important. We need to make sure that the infrastructure and anything else associated with it is made accessible from the get-go rather than trying to do workaround later. Put that point there. Awesome. So the next stage is gathering information and the background on this. So what is the current information out there? What decisions, laws already exist surrounding the issue? So at the moment, I believe most of it is state controlled. A really important recommendation made within the Disability Royal Commission was about enacting a Disability Rights Act. So that will allow policy and public decisions made regarding any accessibility will go back towards that, reflecting the Disability Rights Act here, as we currently don't have a federal Disability Rights Act. So that one will come important with this. Another important thing we can reference when looking at this is recommendations from the Royal Commission. Got another comment here. People without disabilities being able to see the wide variety of people who make up society. Yeah, definitely. And I think that ties in with the education and the representativeness as well. So when we are gathering the information and background on a decision we are trying to make, a really useful tool, Google is your best friend. It can help you look for what decisions and laws already exist surrounding this issue and what the current information is. So you can look at if it's a local government area you're trying to do, looking at past projects and any feedback, comments from citizens. Yeah, so having people with lived experience to speak to policymakers, engage members of the community with communication skills to speak up, show our diverse range of skills, be bold, and show how the whole community benefits when accessibility is a priority. Yeah, so whilst we're in this stage of gathering information, it's really important to let people know why accessibility is vital. Yeah, so that should always be a priority as well when you're making decisions concerning a particular group, that their best interest is considered, and nothing about us without us is always a good motto to keep in mind for that. So gathering this information and background. So if we're looking at an area where there isn't much accessibility experience or no documentation or feedback or anything like that, can also refer to other government LGA, so local government areas. Refer to overseas practices as well. See what other solutions have been used. We have an aging population. Disability can affect anyone from old to young sports people. No one is immune from illness or injury, and forward thinking saves money and time in the future. Yeah, awesome. And so this is why we need our voices at the front of these conversations as well, is because this lived in experience is invaluable knowledge. And if the decision makers don't have that in mind, then that's going to keep creating more problems. So another information as well is to check international human rights standards. So there's a couple of bodies you can check you work on for that. So you can look at conventions, treaties, the Declaration of Human Rights. Gathering the information as well. So this, where we spoke about stakeholders before, an important part in the stakeholder process in gathering information is consulting. And so each step kind of flows on into the next one. So this is a great time to gather all the information you have received from stakeholders. So gaining hearts and minds and giving policymakers a benefit makes them more likely to collaborate on projects. It's more cost effective to build accessible spaces now than to retrofit buildings later. Perfect. Employing people with disabilities benefits every stakeholder. Exactly. Great point there. Okay, so on to the next step. So I've put in here a comment that I said before, mandating all public spaces have minimum accessibility. So we're looking at developing options and alternatives. So in this step, it is time to list all possible alternatives to reach the desired outcomes. So what are our options here? What we can do to create different options and alternatives? So we can have all views expressed from stakeholders mapped out. So if we're looking at this from a local government area, possible solutions can be that there is those public space minimum accessibility laws, but that they differ in region to region to accommodate for that area. So flexible, various minimum standards depending where location is. Any thoughts on other solutions and possible alternatives here that we can do? Oh, a timeline is beneficial and creates security for all stakeholders. Yep. Balancing expectations with reality in terms of a budget and location and a willingness to compromise. Perfect. So budget and resources is a major one in this step. We have to take into consideration that in some situations you might not get funding, or you get some or not as much as you need, and it's all so many different variables. So it's important to have these options and alternatives. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next stage. So this stage is evaluation. So what impact will this decision have? What are the implications? And is this the best option of all the alternatives? So if we look at creating a minimum standard, so we've consulted with the stakeholders, and we believe that the minimum standards differing from each region will be the best way to solve this issue. So what are the impacts going to be of this? Are there implications? And is this the best option of all the alternatives? So if you want to pop in the chat any impacts you believe that a decision like this will have. So we can put in there more inclusivity. Using the views of people with lived experience in conjunction with engineers or others involved in the project to assess viability before implementation. Yeah, let's pop that in as well. And it's important in this step as well, when you're evaluating the whole process that has led you here, the impact, what will it have? So what's the impact going to be of involving disabled people in this decision-making process? So there's impacts such as they'll feel empowered and that they've been heard and seen. There's also the impact that those making the decision can realize how useful it is engaging with stakeholders and lived in experience. Yeah, so another comment, testing everything and looking at multiple outcomes and possible concerns and how they may be mitigated. Perfect, put in there. So positive impacts can be, there will be minimum standards for accessibility. Ensuring that governments have to abide by this. So this is a huge impact on the community because this means that any new buildings put in place will have to have these requirements. And as mentioned before, retrofitting as well, if any other buildings need to be upgraded depending on the policy created, then they too have to follow that. It sets a new standard as well. It's showing that by having a minimum standard that you're starting to have that accessibility lens used. Set standard. Right. Weighing the evidence. So imagine what each alternative option would lead to. As you weigh the evidence, you will start to favor certain alternatives, place these in priority order. So, I've got another comment here. There'll be improved mental health and the flow-on effect for less health expenditure needed. Brilliant. That's perfect point. So it's cost saving as well in the end. So we'll put that in there. Okay, so imagine what each alternative option would lead to. So different options will lead to different outcomes. So one major one that Jane has just mentioned is the less health expenditure needed. So expenditure needed. So when you get to a step like this within the public decision-making process, this is where you'll gather all the different options and alternatives that have been discussed. And now is the time to prioritize which one is going to have the best outcome. It's good to have a group setting for that as well, because then we don't allow for unconscious bias to come through as well. So this is again why public decision-making needs so many different stakeholders involved to get the best possible outcomes that are representative. And implementation. Once you've made your decision, act on it. Develop a plan to make your decision tangible and achievable. So we've got a comment here. Publicity may be needed to ease concerns of other businesses or members of the wider community. And that's perfect. That can fit in exactly here with the implementation. So we need to ensure that we're getting the right message out there, that people are aware of the decision that has been made, so that there's accountability, there's transparency. So transparency of the decision made and how the decision was made. So an important thing, if it's going to be affecting public spaces, you need to have enough signage, you need to have enough knowledge given to everyone so they understand what changes are going to be happening as well. Yeah, I've got another comment. So maintain a cohesive planning organizational structure so plans don't fall apart at the end. Perfect. So, and that will also come under the review stage as well, maintaining and management of the new decision. So once implemented, you need to create effective review processes to ensure the outcome is up to date and relevant. So steps for this could be a formal review process involving the stakeholders necessary, whether this be consulting with the same people you consulted with in the first place, running new test groups. Sometimes groups become weary after months or years of planning, and this could cause the stakeholders to lose trust. Yeah, so trying to find a way to keep stakeholders aligned with the decision and making sure that they still have that trust. So keeping strong relationships with stakeholders. Perfect. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So we've gone through all those stages. When you are making public decisions like that at a higher scale, there'll of course be more stakeholder engagement and using those steps more in depth. But I hope that you've been able to get a good understanding of the public decision-making stages. And I will also have those materials as a handout for us as well that I'll get to send. And also everyone who came today will receive a merch pack. So you'll be hearing from me shortly to receive those merch packs in the mail. Just wanted to thank you all for coming before we wrap it up. Was there any questions, comments, or any thoughts that anyone wanted to voice or bring up? Thank you. That was so much fun and beneficial. Thank you both. Thank you for that. So on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, same time, 1 till 2 p.m. Australian Daylight Savings Time, 1st of November, going to be running session 2. I'm going to go through the same sort of drill using an exercise to engage and go through the policy cycle in more depth. So talking about stakeholders in particular in workshop 2, and then workshop 3 will be discussing different types of decisions such as supported decision making. But all of these sessions will be uploaded to the website where you'll be able to access them, as well as the handouts and any information created with that. If there was no other questions or comments, thank you so much for attending today, and I hope you found today's session informative. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Have fun. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Awesome. I'll see you then.
Bye. Have a good day.
You too.